Hello again, this is Brandon Douglas speaking for the Fach system, part 2. Now let's go ahead and continue where we left off. We left off in the middle lower voice, talking real quick about the lyric mezzo-soprano and the coloratura mezzo-soprano. Now let's get on to a dramatic side with dramatic mezzo-soprano. Usually they have a range of a G3 all the way up to a B5 sometimes, which can be very high. It's a fuller sound. There's a low tessitura, and you often sing with dramatic soprano, since dramatic mezzo-soprano, the voices balance out over the orchestra, which it requires a very big voice to go over. One of the biggest roles for the dramatic mezzo-soprano is Carmen from Bizet's Carmen. You can really hear Carmen go up to the fuller register up in the higher tessitura part. The contralto is one of the original main voice parts. So your range goes from an F3 all the way to an A5, which is a really big range. It's a dark, deep tone. You often sit down in the much lower registers. A lot of it is comic roles, but one of the roles that's most famous for the contralto is Olga from Eugene Onegin by Tchaikovsky. Hopefully you were able to hear some of those really low notes down to here, but with the sound, I don't know if you are, but hopefully you're able to hear those really sink low, and the contralto is great for going very low. Let's talk about the male Fach now. Male Fach includes the main three: tenor, baritone, bass. There are subdivisions, which include the lyric and dramatic, but we also add another subdivision, which is the counter. So let's first talk about upper male voices. The countertenor sings in falsetto. It's a male that sort of resembles an alto or soprano. These were originally meant for castrati roles, and a lot of controversy came in every once in a while with pants roles being still, where they should be for females, or try to make them males. One of the most popular of these controversies and big roles for countertenors is Julius Caesar in Handel's Giulio Cesare. And you can really hear a very pure tone, and with the florid motion, it just sounds exactly like a commonly believed female voice, alto soprano. Now, the tenor legato is a very high tenor, very high range, going all the way up from a C3 all the way up to E and F5 sometimes. Often they definitely do a lot of high Cs, at the very least maybe up to D. A light and sweet voice, very high range, very similar to like the lyric, but even higher. It's coloratura, florid high notes, and one of the biggest roles for this is Tonio from La Fille de Richemont by Donizetti. And who was performing was Juan Diego Flores, who even gives advice about singing the role like Tonio, which is not rushing into a role like that. The tenor has to be really comfortable, so making sure that you do range exercises before your student ever tackles something like that, or even an aria close to that. The lyric tenor is one of the most popular of these of the roles. And this includes going all the way from C3 to C5, the most common register for the tenor. These strong lyrical notes provide for a not very heavy sound and making sure it's all beautiful and flowing throughout. One of the best roles for a lyric tenor is the role of Faust in Gounod's Faust, and here is Salut de Maréchal de Pere. Flowing lines and then leading into a big part here. If the volume was a problem for you, I apologize for that, but that is lyrical tenor sound, very florid motion, and just flowing lines that build up. Alright, real quick, we're just going to talk briefly about the tenor buffo. The range goes from C3, can go all the way up to a high B. Character roles often, and sometimes they even do distinct voices to make them more character-like. It's a lower tenor part, usually sits in the middle voice, and one of the most famous roles of these is Don Basilio in The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart. It's usually recitative, and so not as much aria and big things. Alright, the Italian initial tenor is very similar to a lyric. It's a heavier lyric, Italian style, very close to spinto, and one of these is The Duke of Mantua from Rigoletto by Verdi. As you can see, the Italian initial tenor, heavy lyric, requires a lot of sound still for some of the higher stuff. Now, since it's close to spinto, let's move on to actually spinto, Jugendlicher Heldentenor. The range goes from a C3 all the way up to a high B and high C. It's a very strong sound, very full voice, and one of the best roles to demonstrate this is Canio from I Pagliacci with Vesti la Giubba by Leoncavallo. And that just gives you an idea of the power it takes to do all that full voice behind the orchestra. Alright, now after spinto and the Jugendlicher Heldentenor, let's get into the actual Heldentenor, the dramatic tenor. Mainly for Wagnerian roles, the range goes from a C3 up to a high B often, sometimes goes up higher, but very rarely. That's a very powerful voice singing over huge orchestras that Wagner designed. And this is the most popular is Tristan from Tristan und Isolde by Wagner. Really big orchestra. Now that was just a very brief clip of what Tristan has already been singing for at least 10 minutes in his aria here. Okay, let's go to the lower male voice. We first look at the lyric baritone, the cavalier baritone, range from a G2 all the way to an A4. It's a high tessitura but lighter voice. One of the greatest roles for this is the role of Papageno in The Magic Flute, with the birdcatcher aria. Now I realize that was a very brief demonstration, but it does show you the staying in the D range while having to go all the way up to a little more higher tessitura. Alright, so the character baritone, or the very deep baritone, this is a range that really tests a baritone, and G2 to G4 is really difficult to do. Lower tessitura, strong, full voice. We're going to skip as far as the clip, but one of the most popular is Rigoletto, from Verdi's Rigoletto, and it is very difficult to pull off, but you need a good, strong, higher voice as well as a lower voice. But something similar is also the dramatic baritone, which is the Helden baritone. Range of G2 to an A3 can go all the way up, and it requires big orchestra. This is getting over that. One of the best roles is Tonio from I Pagliacci by Leoncavallo. Listen for the orchestra and the swell, as well as the power behind his voice. And that's the kind of power that it really requires to get over that big orchestra. Okay, on a little more comedic with the Spiel bass, the bass buffo, comic bass, it's between lyric and dramatic, often lower range, very difficult parts. A lot of them require high energy. Specifically, one of the most is Leporello from Don Giovanni by Mozart. Listen for the patter. In the lower range, you can tell that it requires a great deal of range between upper and lower registers. And this is just a good example of more diverse character as well. Now we're going to skip the clip for a dramatic bass baritone as well for right now. But no, it's very similar to Tristan, where they sing very long amounts of time for Wagner and Verdi. The range goes from places like an E2 all the way to an F4, and it's very diverse in range. You're singing over huge orchestras, and one of the best examples here is the Dutchman, the Flying Dutchman, with his aria Die Frist ist where he goes all the way from low notes up to high notes. But something similar is the heavy bass, which you see all the way down to a C2 up to an F4, a really huge range. Lowest voice, it's dark and deep, divides into lyric and dramatic, and one of the best roles for one of these is Osmin from the Abduction from the Seraglio by Mozart. As you can tell, it's a very incredibly diverse in range, going all the way down to a D, a low D, up to a high F in a matter of moments. Alright, so just to wrap up real quick, some quick things to think about are breaking the Fach, as Fach is for roles, not the voice. There's a lot of famous singers such as Jonas Kaufmann, Joyce DiDonato, but it started all the way back with Placido Domingo breaking the rep that was thought to be their voice type, and it really wasn't, it's just the Fach. Comfortability is very important. Range expansion, acting ability are all incredibly important with the Fach, but making sure that you do not take it in the voice type. As far as lists, there are several lists that you can go to. You can find similarities between them, but I do not recommend relying on them. There's a lot of lists. You can use Wikipedia, even has a great list, and there's a lot of other systems that work. Teaching roles, not voice, in healthy singing. And then here are just some resources that you can take a look at in basic lists.